Hi, this is KYLA CLAPHAM, and I am your host on Combat Boots to High Heels on Society Bites Radio, part of the Radio Air Network family. Today we're going to talk a little bit about laws and policies that I feel should be in place in society. Because at the time, 3 years ago, of my research, there were around 17 states that have protection laws out of 50 states in our union. That is sad. I'm sorry to say, those are mostly all northern states or out west. Laws and policies for transgender people um, are very vital because we're not third class citizens. If a transgender person is murdered, sometimes the law enforcement, depending on where you're at in the country, decides to drag their feet and not do a full, complete investigation. If you are in an area where they just treat the person as a person, then yes, they're going to get downright nitty gritty and investigate and bring the people to justice. And hopefully the court systems will comply and bring that person to justice as well. But just because somebody doesn't understand what a person is going through doesn't make their life any less important, nor does it mean that their human rights need to be taken away. And that is why it's time to include hate crimes on murder charges. Even if it's a first degree murder, it's not to lessen the charge, but to strengthen it. And hate crimes shouldn't be considered different than murder charges if there is murder involved. The hate crime part of it should strengthen that case and help the state's attorney's office bring forth true justice for the person and their family. But unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen. And you can find that in news articles such as was reported September 28, 2017, with ABC News, ran the article from the Associated Press. Trans teen murder case raises questions. Do LGBTQ hate crime laws work? And at that time, they were not working that well because the young lady that was found was astonishingly violated against. She was violently stabbed, not only in the genitalia, and they buried the body. Then they moved the body from there to burn the body. And that's where the police found it, the girl's body in a burn barrel. All three of the people were convicted with first degree murder. But unfortunately, Missouri did not count hate crimes towards that because they were considered a lesser punishment than the first degree murder. But if the hate crime was added into there, then it would have strengthened that murder conviction and could have added more time on there for those people. It's baffling what some states think and what some courts think in this. Um, Time Magazine's article, Why Transgender People Are Being Murdered at a Historic Rate by Katie Seitzman's August 17, 2015. And one of the things that I quoted from her was, right now we're experiencing a Dickensian time where it's best of times and it's the worst of times at once, says transgender rights advocate Mason Davis, who formerly ran the Transgender Law Center. We're seeing a marked increase in public awareness about transgender people and really incredible progress for trans rights, especially from a legal perspective. At the same time, we still represent and are part of a community that experiences incredibly high rates of unemployment, poverty, and violence. If we want to be able to treat people properly, everybody deserves the right to employment. Everybody deserves the right to provide for their family. This article continued to talk about how transgender persons are misrepresented and reports of violence or harassment actions are placed, but then it falls on the law enforcement's ethics of how they want to report a crime. If they do not agree with the person's lifestyle, then there lies an issue. And they bring their own bias into the reports. In my opinion, these reports should not carry bias of the officer, but state the facts of what was happening, what went on. And unfortunately, this is seen in a lot of murder cases where evidence gets left out of the police report because of a bias against the transgender community. That is why the Fifth Judicial Circuit Court doesn't accept the transgender pronouns. They don't want, they're putting their bias in there. They're not wanting to accept a person for the person and who they are. Granted, in those stories, that was somebody that was already incarcerated and had been through incarceration, had not been through the name change or any other changes at that point in time, from what I gather from those articles. But when we look at policies that are out there, it's easier to redefine than laws are. Policies are easier to redefine. Laws are there to help protect us, yes, but they're harder to redefine. But laws are also set there and not always set for interpretation. So there is an ethical process that we have to take and lawmakers need to take after they're elected. And that they need to realize that they represent more than just a political party. Their representation is their constituents. Okay, if you look at this standpoint in office, we wouldn't need to have a battle over the bills that are being proposed by the lawmakers to change current laws. So here's what one person says that Hoffman from the Williams Institute at UCLA School of Law. There's a saying, you don't count in policy circles until someone counts you. Okay, this was by Gary J. Gates, who's a demographer and former research director of the group that did this analysis for the Williams Institute at the UCLA Law School, which focuses on law and policy issues related to sexual orientation and gender identity. Being it's 2020 here in the United States, we have our census, so it's important for everyone to be counted in that census. And that will help let lawmakers know who's in their constituency, how they need to help those people. And we also know that there's statistical evidence of transgender population in every state and in every country. With that precedent from that above, from the quote from Mr. Gates, the transgender community has been counted and should be counted in policy circles. It's time to weigh and measure laws to ensure that no citizen is treated as a third-class citizen, because there are no third-class citizens in the world, nor are there any second-class citizens in the world. We are all first-class citizens on different socioeconomic levels. When we look at the socioeconomics of everything, we see disparities that are brought forth from being reclassed into different socioeconomic groups. And it's time to end those disparities. I started Transgender Forum USA at this time during my thesis, just because I wasn't ready for combat boots to high heels blog yet, nor doing podcasts. But during that, it was just to help create and collect data and information for my thesis. But there was an article that I posted about Pakistan to make discrimination against trans people illegal. That was astonishing that a country such as Pakistan would propose allowing transgender people to own property, have a driver's license, have employment, impose fines against people who discriminated against them. I thought that was an extremely wonderful thing that this country was doing to help a portion of their country, but yet our country has an issue doing that, okay? The Pakistan article was Protection Rights Bill from 2017, and it would help empower the Pakistani and transgender community where they would not have to go before government ran medical board in order to change their gender. It also empower them to be able to get their driver's license, like I stated, and it makes their harassment prohibited. Right? So what's that correlate to us? Anyone found guilty of forcing a transgender person to beg will be sentenced to 6 months in prison and served a fine of the 50,000 RS, which was theirs. And I that was straight from the article. But what I did was I converted the Pakistani rupee to US dollars at the time, and that constituted a fine of $432.35 in US dollars. To us, that may not seem like a lot in our country, but to somebody in Pakistan, that may be a month's salary. That may be how they live, how they feed their family. So Florida has no specific protection laws for the transgender community. Okay. And I researched for Florida transgender statutes. My results were disappointing. Even looking for using transgender with health of the transgender people brought about no results. And that's a shame because I was trying to get insurance for my family at the time, and I would ask, simple question, do you cover transgender issues? The phone would click right away. And I kind of had that suspicion that was going to happen anyway, but it's wrong because everybody deserves protection policies. Everybody deserves health care other than just the Affordable Health Care Act. So what I found in my research was that prospering specific protection laws and statutes for the transgender community, the stats that I found were alarming but the most shocking finding and the new population estimate is that after California, the largest amount of transgender people lives in Texas and Florida, two states that lack even the most basic employment and housing protections for LGBT citizens. In both Texas and Florida, with 125,350 trans people and 100,300 trans people, respectively. A lack of state laws prohibiting gender identity based discrimination leaves transgender and non binary residents vulnerable to being